If God created the universe, then who created God? This question is neither new nor a challenge posed by atheists to stump believers. In fact, this inquiry dates back to ancient times, with philosophers and theologians deeply pondering it. Even today, it remains a highly debated topic. Christianity offers an answer that is both simple and profound. God was not created. Revelation 1 verse 8 clearly states, "I am the Alpha and the Omega, who is, who was, and who is to come, the Almighty." This signifies that God is eternal, without beginning or end, and his existence does not rely on any external cause. He is a self-existing being. This concept of eternity might be hard to grasp because everything we know, including life, planets, and even the universe, has a distinct starting point. For instance, the Big Bang Theory describes how the universe expanded from a minuscule point to form the world as we know it. However, for God, time holds no significance. He is unrestricted by time and space, transcending the causal chain. In the 13th century, philosopher Thomas Aquinas proposed the famous first cause theory. In his Summa Theologica, Aquinas asserted that everything in the universe has a cause, but this chain of causality cannot regress infinitely. There must be an initial cause to set everything in motion, and this uncaused cause is God. In other words, God is the one who needs no creation, yet can create everything. However, the crux of the debate arises here. Critics argue that if the universe needs a cause, why doesn't God? Similar criticism comes from Stephen Hawking. In his book, The Grand Design, Hawking suggested that the universe could arise from nothing without a divine creator, explaining its origin through physical laws. This view directly conflicts with traditional creationism, especially for those who believe God is the first cause. However, the Bible does not shy away from this issue. It provides a clear response. In Exodus 3 verse 14, when Moses asks for God's name, God replies, "I am who I am," profoundly indicating that God is existence itself, needing no cause or explanation. This concept leads to an important tenet in Christian theology, God's self-sufficiency, meaning his existence derives from himself, independent of any external factors or conditions. Simply put, the reason for God's existence is his own being, a belief that has persisted in Christianity for millennia. Of course, not everyone accepts this explanation. Many skeptics think the idea of God having no beginning seems like an excuse to avoid the problem. In human cognition, everything has a cause and effect, so saying God has no starting point seems incomprehensible. However, in Christian theology, God is viewed as transcending causality in time, and this transcendence is at the heart of the debate. For Christians, God's eternal nature is one of the most awe-inspiring core beliefs. God has no beginning and no end. Revelation 22 verse 13 declares, "I am the Alpha and the Omega, the first and the last, the beginning and the end." This is not a symbolic statement, but a direct description of God's essence. God transcends the constraints of time, unaffected by any changes. For him, the past, present, and future are the same state, while we live in the flow of time, feeling the passage of years every day. However, God is not bound by these rules. His existence transcends time itself. This concept not only overturns our understanding of time, but also prompts humanity to rethink the essence of existence. To better understand God's eternity, we can find examples in the Bible. God is depicted as existing from beginning to end, as mentioned in Psalm 90 verse 2. "Before the mountains were born, or you brought forth the whole world, from everlasting to everlasting, you are God." Here, "from everlasting to everlasting," is not merely poetic rhetoric. It clearly states that God existed before anything came into being. This view raises many profound questions, as our thinking always revolves around beginnings and endings to understand the world. Humans are born, grow old, get sick, and die. All things have a beginning and an end. However, God's eternity completely transcends this cognitive framework. For God, there is no so-called beginning or origin. He is existence itself. Isaiah 40 verse 28 writes, "The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary. and his understanding no one can fathom. This verse clearly indicates that God is unaffected by time and fatigue. He always exists with infinite wisdom, never changing. This is not an added belief of Christianity, but the core of the entire faith system. If God were also created, he would be no different from other creations, equally subject to time and change. However, Christianity emphasizes that God transcends all creations. He is the starting point of everything, not the result. This thought was further elaborated by many early Christian thinkers, most notably the 4th century thinker Augustine of Hippo, who had a great interest in time and eternity. In his Confessions, he insightfully proposed that time is a part of God's creation and did not exist before the command, "Let there be light," meaning that God is not constrained by time, while we live within it, limited by it. In other words, Augustine pointed out that God not only transcends time, but also created it. This view was far ahead of its time and aligns with modern scientific theories about the origins of time and space. You might wonder, what does this have to do with us? The key here is that God's eternity changes our understanding of the meaning of life. If God is eternal, he has a perspective that transcends time, able to see every moment of history. The past, present, and future are all the present to him. This is also why Christians believe in God's omniscience of the future, because he already exists in the future. What does this mean? If God is eternal, his knowledge is infinite. He not only knows the future, but is already in it. Therefore, God's plan does not unfold gradually with time, but is a grand blueprint completed from the start. This is why Christianity considers God's plan crucial. He not only created the universe, but also established a magnificent blueprint already fulfilled. Next, we delve into an important concept that might overturn your understanding of existence: the ontological argument, proposed by the 11th century philosopher and theologian Anselm of Canterbury. It remains a significant topic in philosophy. Anselm's core idea is that God is a being than which nothing greater can be conceived. It sounds abstract, but his meaning is clear. God is the greatest being, surpassing all imagination. If God exists only in our minds and not in reality, we can imagine a greater being, a God that exists in reality. Thus, if God is merely a concept in thought, he is not truly God. In other words, the truly greatest being must exist in reality, because a God that exists in reality is greater than one that only exists conceptually. This argument seems simple, yet carries immense impact. Anselm attempted to prove logically that since we can conceive the concept of God, God must exist in reality, otherwise, he would not be the greatest being. This view sparked widespread discussion and intense debate at the time. Of course, this argument was soon challenged, with the most famous rebuttal coming from Anselm's contemporary, Gaunilo of Marmoutiers, who offered a well-known analogy. If I can imagine the greatest island, does that mean it must exist? Gaunilo argued that merely imagining something does not prove its existence in reality, suggesting that Anselm's argument had a logical flaw. You cannot simply imagine something and claim it must exist. Gaunilo's criticism became the first serious challenge to the ontological argument in history. However, Anselm was not shaken and further upheld his viewpoint. His response was that God is different from an island or any other imaginable object because God is a necessarily existing being, entirely independent of anything else. He believed that God's existence does not rely on external factors. God must exist, which is the very definition of God. During the Enlightenment, philosophers continued to delve into the ontological argument, with the most notable criticism from Immanuel Kant. Kant argued that existence is not a predicate, and one cannot simply add existence as an attribute to a concept to prove its reality. His core argument was that existence is not a trait that can increase the greatness of something. Therefore, Kant believed Anselm's argument could not prove God's existence. Despite Kant's criticism significantly impacting the ontological argument, it did not end the discussion. Instead, it sparked more interest among philosophers. In modern times, philosophers like Alvin Plantinga revisited and improved the argument. Plantinga used modal logic to propose a new version, exploring the relationship between possibility and necessity, giving new life to the argument and making it a hot topic in philosophy once again. We often hear a common question: Does God also need a cause? At first glance, this question seems simple because, in our world, everything has a cause. Trees grow from seeds, buildings need builders, and humans are born from parents. However, when it comes to God, the situation is different. In Christian theology, causality applies only to creations, not to God. What sets God apart is that he is the uncaused cause, meaning he does not need a reason to exist, but is the reason for everything else. This view is deeply rooted in Christian philosophy. As early as the 4th century, Athanasius of Alexandria elaborated on this, staunchly asserting that God is self-sufficient, relying on no external force, and exists by his own power, with nothing preceding him. This is the concept of divine aseity in theology. Simply put, God's fundamental reason for existence is himself. This view is closely related to God's eternality. If God is eternal, it means he has no beginning and is not limited by time or space. Therefore, when someone asks who created God, the question itself is flawed because God does not belong to the category of things that need to be created. He transcends time and space. As God said to Moses in Exodus 3 verse 14, "I am who I am." This statement clearly declares that God's existence does not depend on anything else. He is existence itself. To better understand this concept, we can borrow Aristotle's first mover theory. Although Aristotle was not a Christian, his ideas profoundly influenced Christian philosophy. He proposed that all motion requires an external force to initiate it, but this cannot regress infinitely. There must be an unmoved mover to start everything. He himself needs no external force, but can move everything, being the root of cosmic motion. Christianity absorbed this idea, viewing God as the ultimate starting point. He needs no mover, yet moves everything. This also raises a core question. Why does God not need a cause, while everything else does? The answer lies in the fact that causality applies only to things with a beginning, and God has no beginning. He has always existed. The opening verse of Genesis states, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." Here, there is no mention of God's origin. His existence is assumed because, in Christian belief, God is the source of all creation. In the 13th century, philosopher Thomas Aquinas systematically elaborated on this in his Summa Theologica, proposing the famous 5 ways to prove God's existence, one of which is the argument from motion. Aquinas believed that everything in the universe is moved by something else, but this chain of causation cannot go back infinitely. There must be a first mover, and this mover is God. He is the prime mover, existing without reliance on any external force. One can understand this as God being like an author, not confined by the story world he created. He exists in a higher dimension, creating the laws of time, space, and the universe, yet not bound by those laws. This is the unique Christian theological description of God, a being that transcends all things, yet is the starting point of all creation. Next, we explore a deeper question, the Kalam cosmological argument, a core area where science and theology intersect, and one of the most persuasive arguments in modern Christian apologetic. Its appeal lies in its reliance not only on philosophical reasoning, but also on scientific evidence, leading people to ponder the true origin of the universe. Although the cosmological argument gained widespread discussion in modern times, it can be traced back to medieval Islamic philosophy and was further refined and developed by Christian thinkers. One of the most famous contemporary proponents is philosopher William Lane Craig, who has repeatedly articulated and defended this argument in public debates. The Kalam cosmological argument is based on 3 simple premises. 1. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. 2. The universe began to exist. 3. Therefore, the universe has a cause. On the surface, this seems like a common-sense deduction, but it directly addresses the question of the universe's origin. Let's first consider the first premise. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. This is almost undisputed because we know that a house does not appear out of nowhere, a car does not exist without reason, and everything with a history must have a cause. This aligns with scientific laws and everyday experience. The second premise is that the universe began to exist. This now has scientific backing. In 1927, astronomer and priest Georges Lemaitre proposed the theory of an expanding universe. later known as the Big Bang Theory. In 1965, scientists discovered cosmic microwave background radiation, seen as the leftover radiation from the Big Bang, proving that the universe indeed began expanding from an extremely dense point, thus having a definite beginning, just as Genesis 1 verse 1 states, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth." The crucial question is, if the universe has a beginning, then it must have a cause, for something cannot come from nothing. Since the universe began to exist at a certain point, there must be a force that initiated this beginning, and this cause could not come from within the universe, because the universe did not yet exist. Therefore, the cause of the universe's birth must transcend time, space, and matter, which is the key to the Kalam cosmological argument pointing to God. This cause must be timeless, spaceless, immaterial, and immensely powerful. This description closely aligns with the Christian definition of God, a point that William Lane Craig has defended in numerous debates. In fact, even atheists find it hard to avoid the profound implications of the universe having a beginning. Stephen Hawking once said, "Almost everyone now believes that the universe and time itself had a beginning at the Big Bang." But the next question is, what caused the Big Bang? Some might think the universe could arise from nothing, but scientifically, nothing is not absolute void. Even in a vacuum, quantum activity exists. Moreover, if the universe could indeed arise from nothing, it would become an exception, completely overturning the basic principle that everything with a beginning has a cause, which is clearly unconvincing. Even if we assume the universe could come from nothing, we must still ask why it came into existence at that particular moment rather than at another time. Clearly, there must be a force that chose to bring the universe into existence at that specific moment. According to the Kalam cosmological argument, this force is God. The cleverness of this argument lies in its use of modern science to support the concept of a creator. The Big Bang Theory is widely accepted, clearly indicating that the universe has a starting point, and Einstein's general relativity also suggests that time and space are intertwined and share a common origin. If science proves that the universe has a beginning, it also implies that there must be a force beyond the universe that initiated that beginning. Surprisingly, Christianity proposed this idea over 2,000 years ago. The Bible begins with, "In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth," a clear statement that the universe did not always exist, but was created by God at a certain point. This belief was established long before scientists proved that the universe is not eternal. Turning back to early Christianity, those great thinkers who laid the foundation of faith, known as the Church Fathers, were intellectual giants of their time, profoundly influencing the formation of Christian theology, especially in discussing God's nature and existence, offering many key insights. Athanasius of Alexandria was a significant figure in the 4th century, steadfastly maintaining the core belief that God is without beginning or end. In his work on the Incarnation, he emphasized that God transcends all creations, existing independently of any external things, self-existing before the birth of time. This view was particularly important at that time because he was engaged in a fierce battle with Arianism. The Arians believed that Jesus was created by God, and thus inferior to God. Athanasius firmly opposed this, asserting that God and Jesus are coexistent and eternal, with neither having a beginning. This became the cornerstone of Christian faith, with a lasting influence to this day. Another thinker worth mentioning is Origen, born in Alexandria in 185 AD. Deeply influenced by the philosophical and theological environment, one of his core ideas is that God is incomprehensible. In his work on First Principles, he wrote that God cannot be contained by the universe or limited by any external thing, meaning that God's existence far surpasses human understanding, and any attempt to understand God's essence is ultimately futile. This idea emphasizes the mystery of God's existence, indicating that God is not constrained by any framework or limitation. Augustine of Hippo is another profoundly influential father, inheriting and developing Origen's thoughts, particularly in the concepts of time and creation. In his Confessions, he delved deeply into the idea that God created time. He posited that God exists outside of time, unbound by past, present, and future. He wrote, "You are the creator of all times, existing before all times." This means that time itself is a creation of God, and thus God is not constrained by time. This idea was groundbreaking at the time, and astonishingly, it aligns with modern scientific theories that time and space have a common origin. Augustine's thoughts far surpassed his era, showing that early Christian thinkers were already contemplating issues that continue to perplex us today. The efforts of these fathers were not merely philosophical explorations, but also responses to heresies and challenges from different worldviews. Their work laid the foundation for modern Christians to understand God's existence. The Nicene Creed, established in 325 AD, is still recited in many churches today, embodying the core beliefs defended by the Fathers. We believe in one God, the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth, of all things visible and invisible. This sentence summarizes the basic tenet of Christianity. God created everything, both visible and invisible, yet He transcends these existences. God's existence is not only a topic of philosophical and scientific discussion, but also concerns human destiny. From the opening of the Bible, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Christianity has emphasized the relationship between the Creator and creation. God is not a distant existence. His eternality and creativity are directly related to human significance and future. Christianity teaches that although God transcends time and space, He is closely connected to our lives. Genesis 1 verse 26 states, "Let us make mankind in our image, in our likeness." This phrase explicitly points out from the beginning that humanity is not a mere chance product of nature, but was intentionally created. Being made in the Creator's image means that humans not only have a unique status, but also share a special connection with this transcendent Creator. Though He surpasses our limitations, He always walks with us. On a deeper level, God's existence is not only the starting point of human life, but also the core of free will, moral responsibility, and ultimate meaning. Without God, who defines right and wrong? If everything in the universe is merely a pile of random events, then where does the meaning of life arise? The Christian faith believes that God's eternal existence imbues human choices and struggles with value. God not only created the world, but continually guides humanity, providing us with the opportunity to choose to follow Him, to live purposefully, and ultimately to share eternal life with Him. This grand plan is especially clear in the New Testament. John 3 verse 16 states, "For God so loved the world that He gave His only Son, that whoever believes in Him shall not perish but have eternal life." This verse not only speaks of hope in the afterlife, but also describes how God intersects with human life through Jesus, opening the path to eternity for us. But the key is that this plan is not imposed on us. It grants us true choice through free will. Deuteronomy 30:19 says, "This day I call the heavens and the earth as witnesses against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessings and curses. Now choose life, so that you and your children may live." This passage emphasizes the relationship between God's existence and human free will. God is eternal, but He gives us the freedom to choose whether to follow or turn away from Him. God's eternity is not only an explanation of the universe's origin, but also concerns how we understand the ultimate meaning of life. If God is eternal, then our lives are not just about mere survival. They are about growth, learning, and stepping into the grand narrative He began writing from the dawn of time. What does this mean for us? Philosophy, science, history, and theology ultimately point to one thing. God's eternal existence is fundamental to understanding why we exist and where we are going. Whether you are a person of faith or someone exploring, this concept, deeply connected to human destiny, is worth pondering. It has not only shaped human history, but continues to provide hope and purpose for people. Thank you for accompanying us on this journey. If you are still watching, we greatly appreciate your support. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel for more exciting content. More intriguing topics are coming soon, so stay tuned. May God bless you all.